Thank you very much for having me here. I'm filling in for Michelle Dupuis, who is SSHRC's resident expert on knowledge mobilization, but I've been very closely working with Michelle for several years in knowledge mobilization programs such as the old AIDS research workshops and conferences, public outreach, knowledge clusters, and the journals program. So I just want to give you an overview of some best practices today and talk to you a little bit about new things that have come out at SSHRC recently related to knowledge mobilization. So, okay, SSHRC supports broad areas of social, developmental, personality, and educational psychology. In terms of subject matter, SSHRC considers eligible proposals related to the theory and methods in these areas, but does not support clinically oriented research with an intent to improve health or research involving clinical trials. So I just wanted to sort of ground us in that. This is a general presentation, though, talking about knowledge mobilization in all areas. So for any questions about eligibility, I can speak with you offline after the talk and put you in touch with specific officers at SSHRC if you have any questions. So basically, SSHRC has introduced some knowledge mobilization guidelines after much discussion and reflection internally and consulting with experts. And we talk about some best practices. Basically, a solid knowledge mobilization plan will help you to identify and invite the best stakeholders, which in turn will contribute complementary knowledge and help to ensure uptake of that knowledge, optimize synergies and leverage information, and allow your research to have the best possible reach. So the approach to knowledge mobilization seeks to optimize what you are already doing and considering the most appropriate indicators that align with your anticipated short and long-term results. So we have new KM guidelines posted on the SSHRC website, and there's some really helpful case studies there, so I invite you to consult the SSHRC website, Effective Knowledge Mobilization Guidelines. Okay. So we released also in July with the Insight Grants launch an updated definition of knowledge mobilization, which really focuses more on the uptake, knowledge users, benefits, and impacts. There is a greater sense that knowledge mobilization, when done well, is a roadmap to greater impacts. And the knowledge mobilization plan is really the groundwork to achieving those optimal impacts. It's also a very helpful tool to reference when the time comes later on to provide midterm or achievement reports. You can also look through and quickly identify which goals were met, which goals are maybe more challenging, or things change as you progress along in your projects. So it's always helpful to look at what's not feasible and why. Maybe we're overambitious. Things happen in the course of living the research project. SSHRC has a big tent approach, which is really an inclusive, everybody welcome approach. It's an umbrella term and includes all of the types of knowledge mobilization. New innovative modes of knowledge mobilization are also welcome. L'équipe doit penser à l'approche le plus convenable, qui correspond vraiment le mieux à leur contexte particulier, c'est-à-dire la matière de sujet, les publics ciblés, et les intervenants. The team must consider the best fit for their context in terms of subject matter, audiences, and stakeholders. As always, SSHRC leaves space for knowledge mobilization within and beyond academia, depending on the circumstances. And I wanted to share with you briefly an example of a proposal that was considered to have an excellent KMB plan. The project spanned several years and focused on the importance of emotion perception for psychological well-being. It had 2 levels of tailored outreach. One was designed to engage community and non-academic partners and knowledge users. And a second tier was really geared towards the academic audience. A knowledge broker was hired, along with consulting the university's expertise on communications. Face-to-face groups with partners help to test the growing body of knowledge and refine it with input from stakeholders. Materials tailored to the audiences, like pamphlets, really, in plain speech, or a social media campaign and a website were used as vehicles to engage in exchange. And the results of exchanges ultimately went into the creation of a video using whiteboard animation to share with YouTube and with their social media campaign. For this particular subject matter and project objectives, the KM plan was really well considered and really well planned. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea. The areas of influence. So here in the list we have some. This is not all-inclusive. These are some examples, some ideas. It really should lead to at least one of these examples when beyond academia to changes in practice, policy, social services. The guidelines provide a framework for the what, who, how, and when. Okay. So we're really looking at querying about, in terms of the research area, really who are we targeting? Who do we want to be involved? Who is going to use the knowledge? The first step is to identify your audience. The researchers, practitioners, students, NGOs, communities, decision makers, general public, particular groups. Have you invited those with a stake in this knowledge to help inform the research agenda or the work? Having their perspective will help to ensure relevance and ground the research. It may even drive the research. Number two is really the how. Knowing your audience will help you determine the most appropriate means of engaging and the level of involvement. You may need to adapt the outreach strategy to really maximize the involvement, engagement, and interest. For example, engaging with youth versus an older generation may involve different types of media. Knowledge brokering and translation, I think, are a really key aspect to ensure the tone and to ensure that you can engage your audience. Adapting the material for optimal uptake. So I encourage you to also consider engaging with researchers in your community who have a knack for mobilizing knowledge and see how they are gaining traction. Perhaps you can adapt some of their practices to your own work. A SSHRC success story in KM and psychology can be found, for example, with Elizabeth W. Dunn at UBC. She works with Social Cognition and Emotion Lab, and you can have a look at her level of media engagement. It's quite astonishing and impressive in terms of the geography and the different levels of media. Okay. So results. Once you have identified your users, the next step is to talk about short, medium, long-range results. This is kind of a fun, creative exercise. Some of the results we can't even imagine yet. They might be 10, 20, 30 years down the road, but thinking about where you're going can help you to plan the steps between now and then. While we understand that anticipated outcomes and impacts may evolve over the course of your project, having these shorter, longer range goals will help you to keep the work on track. Indicators, okay, everybody's favorite. One of the hardest things for scholars to plan. But whatever the project, the indicators should be linked both to your goals and to your audience and to your specific area of research. So creatively thinking about how you can determine or demonstrate that you are meeting your goals may take on many forms that are really unique to your particular project. Indicators are closely linked to your expected outputs, outcomes, and impacts. Another little example are indicators related to forensic psychology project about rehabilitating youth and impacts of matching psychological profiles with appropriate correctional services could include the number of youth involved, the number of social service providers participating, policy impacts, changes, new or improved services for young offenders, and ultimately, over a long period of time, perhaps fewer return offenders. So that's just a thought. Some other tips. We're looking at knowledge mobilization as a menu that you customize to your needs. It's not a long list that you have to do all these things. And if you do a website, a social media plan, this, and this, that's what you, it's not a formulaic thing or prescriptive. It's really dependent on your particular work and what will optimize it and what makes sense for that. Sur les médias de la mobilisation des connaissances, the how can include many options beyond the simple website, a lot of scope for innovation and creativity, storytelling, theater art exhibits, leveraging various social medias, art exhibits. Face-to-face meetings allow for relationship building and synergies to grow, the exchanges of tacit knowledge that you might not otherwise be able to gather. Really forging those relationships of trust. It is best to rely on more than one approach. A website alone is really not engaging necessarily enough. It might be, depending on how it's set up, it could be fairly passive or it could be more engaging, but if you complement it with many other aspects to your plan, it can be very rich. Another thing to consider when people are so busy and kind of focused in on their work, but this can really have a big impact, is bearing in mind official languages, other languages that might be relevant to your work, accessibility for the widest reach, inclusiveness, especially if the audience is from an official language or another language, is a knowledge stakeholder or potential user. Okay, this is a little hard to read. There's a lot of text there, but really what we've found in our observations of really successful projects is they have a cocktail of many things, many aspects, and because you don't always know what, if you put all of your eggs in one basket and that doesn't work, if you have complementary things to support your plan, there's more likelihood for success. And we have found combining more than one way to interact, including face-to-face events or meetings, are very helpful. And another definite advantage is having a dedicated person with expertise in communications to different audiences, acting as a broker to help. Someone with the ability to adapt and translate research knowledge for broader uptake by different audiences can be very helpful too. Okay, so just to conclude, it's very helpful if you can target decision makers of an organization and engage with them to get their perspectives, but also consider approaching people within the organization having different perspectives to get that complementary knowledge base. For example, SSHRC, if you speak with a director or a VP, they might have a very different knowledge set than a program officer who's based in the practicalities of everyday working with the project and the program objectives. So those are some little nuggets for you to consider starting your day. I hope this was helpful, and thank you very much.